So some of you might know about a barn burner of a primary race going right now in New York State for governor. As you know, Andrew Cuomo, as you might know, Andrew Cuomo is running for a third term as governor. I think George Pataki was once governor for 3 terms in a row. So there is precedent. And it's very likely he will win. And it's very likely he'll win the Democratic nomination. There's a possibility, though, that Cynthia Nixon, who is the more progressive candidate in the Democratic race, could spoil his chances at winning either the nomination or even the governorship. One of the reasons is that New York has more of an open election system. So even if she does not win the Democratic primary, it's possible that Cynthia Nixon could be platformed by a different party. By the way, I think the New York State Working Families Party could be one that would endorse her and split from the Democrats. So even without winning the Democratic primary, she could appear on the general election ballot and cause a little trouble for Andrew Cuomo, or a lot of trouble, depending how it goes. Now, one of the reasons that this race is attracting a lot of attention is because of a bitch fight, a cat fight between Cynthia Nixon, who didn't instigate this, and Christine Quinn, who is the former New York City Council president. She was city council president until, I think, 2013, and possibly later than that. And she ran for mayor in 2013. She is gay. She's very upfront about that. If you watch Lionel's show, he gags about it all the time, making fun of the fact that her whole platform is that she's gay. And it's all about how the fact that she's gay and it's great and she should be mayor. So Cynthia Nixon has been running for New York governor for, this is from Slate, by the way. It says she's been running for New York governor for approximately 1 day, and she's already catching flack for, one second. Shit. Anyway, for being gay. The actress and political activist is nothing but, quote, an unqualified lesbian, said Christine Quinn, a major supporter of sitting governor Andrew Cuomo, in an interview with the New York Post published on Tuesday. Quinn is a lesbian herself, giving her ample political cover to gently remind New York voters that Nixon falls under the LGBTQ umbrella. Nixon has identified as bisexual in the past and has vehemently resisted simplified explanations of her sexuality. In addition to Quinn's allegiance to Cuomo, her swift attack on Nixon stems in part from bad blood. In 2013, Nixon campaigned hard and helped raise money for Bill de Blasio, who defeated Quinn in the New York City mayoral race. Cynthia Nixon was opposed to having a qualified lesbian become mayor of New York City. Now she wants to be an unqualified lesbian to be the governor of New York, Quinn told the Post. So essentially, there's nothing now that the Salon goes through a really convoluted analysis of this, but I'll give you the explanation. And I heard it from Lionel earlier. I'm going to echo some of the things he said and try to enter in some of my perspectives on this. First of all, this ignores a lot of the larger issues, which we're going to get into, about why this could be crucial for New York State. But here's basically the big issue with Cynthia Nixon and Christine Quinn. So basically, in 2013, Michael Bloomberg, I think, was term limited. He'd had 3 terms as mayor. And I think the front runner in that race at the time was Christine Quinn, because she was city council president. Then Anthony Weiner jumped into the race, and kind of tossed the race into a bunch of chaos. And as Anthony Weiner jumped in, so did Bill de Blasio and a bunch of other people. And, it basically became kind of a shit show. And one of the reasons that Christine Quinn started to lose supporters among progressives was the fact that she was very on board with some of the issues that made Bloomberg so hated by progressives. So this is this is Slate and this is by Dave Weigel, who now works for the Washington Post. This is from September 11th, 2013, and they're and I guess they republished it in Slate, but they were talking about how anyone watching the polls could see that City Council Speaker Christine Quinn, a former frontrunner, was as doomed as the kid in the horror movie who uses a stranger's phone. Quinn had wanted to run 4 years earlier when Bloomberg was supposedly term limited. Bloomberg wanted the term limit scrapped just for him. Quinn initially called that disgraceful. Beset by weak poll numbers, likely to lose a 2009 Democratic race, Quinn reversed herself and pushed through an exception that would let the mayor run again. He did, facing a weaker Democrat, whom he nearly lost to anyway. Quinn never recovered. Until this summer, she led the Democratic primary, but her support was vaporous. As soon as Anthony Weiner entered the race, the narcissistic former congressman was immediately tied with her in the polls. When he destroyed himself with an online flirting scandal for the second time, New York City public advocate Bill de Blasio swooped in and started surging. De Blasio's campaign promised a clean break with the Bloomberg years, decrying income inequality, rejecting stop and frisk, and promising a special tax on the wealthy to pay for education. When I dropped into one of the final de Blasio rallies, I heard supporters chanting, "We are the 99% during slow moments and trying an Occupy-style mic check when one labor leader's megaphone crapped out. The center of gravity in New York politics was moving from Wall Street to Zuccotti. Bloomberg was not pleased. In an interview with New York, he accused de Blasio of running a class warfare and racist campaign. Racist because of all the ads starring de Blasio's mixed race and Afroed son Dante. He also finally kind of sort of endorsed Quinn. He said, whether you're in favor of Chris Quinn becoming mayor or not, I will tell you this. She did a very good job for 7.5 years of keeping legislation that never should have made it to the floor. That would have been damaging to the city from ever getting there. He said, and she deserves a lot of credit for what's gone on in the city in the last 7.5 years. So this was basically kryptonite for her support among progressives. Bloomberg, of course, is very known for his stop and frisk policy in New York, which was unpopular with progressives, kind of controversial with everybody else as well, too. And also because his policies made New York one of the most expensive cities in the country to live in. I think it might be the most expensive, if I'm not mistaken. So essentially, his support helped torpedo her campaign, and Bill de Blasio became mayor. Now, Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo, who is the current governor of New York, hate each other. They can't stand each other. They're fighting over funding for the subway in New York City. Cuomo needs more from, or de Blasio needs more from Cuomo because New York City can't pay to maintain their own subways. Cuomo doesn't want to give the money to New York City because people in upstate New York, which he does need some of their support in order to be able to win a third term, they're tired of having to pay for all the projects in New York City. New York, upstate New York, and Long Island to a certain extent, they're always talking about rebelling against the New York City having all of the budget priorities in the New York State budget. So there's a major feud going on between de Blasio and Cuomo. So Cynthia Nixon, who stepped in and supported de Blasio in 2013, she's being used, according to some people, as de Blasio's pawn in order to fight against Andrew Cuomo. And hypothetically, if she were to be governor, yeah, then she would probably sign a bill passed by the state Senate or the state House or the state legislatures in order to send that money to New York State. Now, missing from this grand plan, is how in any way this could actually pass in the New York legislature, which is controlled by a coalition of Republicans and rebel Democrats who are mostly from upstate and other parts of New York that are not New York City, that are against this type of thing. They have to represent their constituents, and they won't get elected if they do it. So I don't know what Cynthia Nixon's plan would be. Now, about the whole lesbian thing, because I know all of you are interested in this, just like I am. Yeah, Christine Quinn is super, super, super proud of being a lesbian. Cynthia Nixon is kind of, sort of proud about liking both dudes and chicks. And then you also have Bill de Blasio's wife, Chirlane McRae, who claims that she used to be a lesbian and now is no longer one, but still thinks it was pretty cool. And she's also black, so that's double points for him, even though he's literally done nothing to earn anything in the progressive oppression identity Olympics. So that's the explanation of that angle. I don't know how Christine Quinn thinks that gains her any traction in that debate. Personally, I know that de Blasio and Cuomo are both very unpopular in New York State and New York City. But de Blasio just won a second term easily. The Republican Party is a joke in New York State. There are no real competitors there. He also beat a woman in the race, Nicole Valoutzis, or whatever her name was, a Greek lady. Maliotakis, I think her name was. Nicole Maliotakis. So how about we discuss, though, what really is the problem with this whole race? They're talking about, is somebody a qualified lesbian or not qualified lesbian? But in reality, what this boils down to, if you think about the issues in New York State, is who is the more progressive candidate to lead the Democratic Party. And Cynthia Nixon is trying to make the point that she is. However, in 2015, there was a video, and she was recorded as saying that, hold on, that she's definitely a Hillary person. Now, this was on May 1st, 2015. This was before Bernie Sanders entered the race, but she never really went back on that. And that's one of the things that is complicating this, that both Andrew Cuomo and Cynthia Nixon were definitely big Hillary Clinton supporters. And Hillary Clinton is actually supporting her now. This is from New York Daily News, and it says, it's even proudly, a winning Clinton-Nixon ticket. And oh my God. Yeah, so that's her and her wife, who they both look like, I don't think we can, I don't think we have any doubt that, she actually makes they cover all the base. Hillary Clinton. Then there's also the issue of, does she support actual progressive policies? Now, let me say this about Governor Cuomo, okay? This is where we get to ask the question, what constitutes a progressive? Now, Andrew Cuomo is the son of Governor Mario Cuomo. And, he's been governor himself for 8 years. And look, there's this article here where the state of New York as well as California, they've both considered single payer, and the legislatures have considered single payer. But unlike some candidates in California, Cuomo has not committed to supporting single payer. However, one progressive policy that he's led, I think he might be the first governor in the country to support, is tuition-free higher education. You can see him here with Hillary Clinton. And by the way, he also had Bernie Sanders come into his state. And you know, it's the Excelsior program. I'm not sure. I think it's something like 53% of college education degree programs are now funded in New York or something like that. But he's walked towards that goal faster than most other state governors in the country. So if, unlike me, you're a progressive, that's a win in his column. Then what else do you got here? You get the fact that Cuomo is also more of an ally of former Mayor Mike Bloomberg. And Mike Bloomberg has said before, and this is from Yahoo and CNBC, he's said that, and he's gone on the record, this is a billionaire who's gone on the record and said that he supports single-payer healthcare. Other quote social programs in which taxpayers are obliged to pay into a system that provides communal benefits like defense or education. Healthcare is a system he believes warrants everybody's contribution because as a society, we have already established that no one will be denied care when their life is at risk. And he says, quote, the simplest way is to have single payer. He said, all the working people pay taxes and you have to spread the burden over everybody. You have to insure a lot of people who don't need insurance because you have to use those monies to pay for health care for those people who do need it. It's going to get more lopsided with time because the costs keep going up. The politics of single payer do not work at the moment, but maybe someday people will look at it differently. So that's his position. He does support single payer. He doesn't think it's politically expedient. But there you go. You have Andrew Cuomo and Michael Bloomberg and supposedly Christine Quinn, who would support single payer. Cynthia Nixon has not said anything specifically about single payer yet, but she's only declared in her campaign for governor so far this week, and we have to wait for. By the way, she doesn't have a website up either. I was looking for that, so I'm going to keep a lookout for that. And I think that, you know, taking a step back, okay, we've gone over the personal feuds between Bloomberg and de Blasio and Quinn and de Blasio and de Blasio and Cuomo. And it looks like, you know, on the surface, there could be, you know, it's a bitch fight between Nixon and Quinn. And I feel, you know, perfectly fine in saying that because what Christine Quinn said about Cynthia Nixon, whatever else you think about Cynthia Nixon is uncalled for. I don't think that Christine Quinn, given the fact that she blew the mayoral race and the fact that she helped Bloomberg stay mayor for an extra 4 years, I think that shows that, no, she's not more qualified than Cynthia Nixon to be mayor of New York City. And therefore, she should shut the fuck up and go back to, feeding her cats over in her apartment or something with her wife. And nobody else has to care. Cynthia Nixon, I'm not a fan of hers, but, you know, I think that she's about as qualified as Christine Quinn. And that's all I have to say about that. What about the real issues for New York State? So you're talking about one of the highest taxed states in the nation. Hundreds of thousands of people have been leaving the state. You have Governor Cuomo is basically fighting with the federal government all the time over, sanctuary cities and stuff like that. The state is the state of New York is in decline, and people are leaving it. And like with Pennsylvania, let's take a look a bit about. I mean, here's the Empire State for this from Empire Center for Public for New York State Policy. It says New York's exploding pension costs. It says public pension costs in New York are mushrooming. Here, I'll give you guys a glance. There's a long document, but this is a think tank, but let's take it with a grain of salt. But here it says, just when taxpayers can least afford it. Over the next 5 years, tax-funded and annual contributions to the New York State Teachers Retirement System will more than quadruple, while contributions to the New York State and Local Retirement System, or NYSLRS, will more than double. According to estimates presented in this report, New York City's budgeted pension costs, which already have increased tenfold in the past decade, will rise by at least 20% more in the next 3 years, according to the city's financial plan projections. So both of those programs are fully funded by government actuarial standards, but we estimate they have combined funding shortfalls of $120 billion when their liabilities are measured using private sector accounting rules. Based on a similar alternative standard, New York City's pension funds have unfunded liabilities of $76 billion as of mid-2008, before their net asset values plunged in the wake of the financial crisis. So, there's already been a budget crisis in New York that was, earlier in Michael Bloomberg's term. This from the Times Union. I think it's in Albany. It says union pension crisis threatens retirement funds. This is from this is a pretty old one though. Yeah. Here we go. So this is from the New York Daily News. Yeah, I almost gave you an article from 1969, so I caught that before I made a fool out of myself. But here you go. So New York retirees struggle to survive after a pension fund bottoms out. So this is what they're looking at. This is Teamsters Local 707. 4,000 retired Teamsters across New York State suffering a fate that could hit millions of working class Americans, the loss of their union pensions. Now, what's not clear here is if these are if these are actually from state workers. So sorry about that. So the question is if this is just Teamsters who are private sector or not. But ultimately, if you're in charge of the state government, if you're the governor, here's another one from Forbes. It says state pension funds as broke as ever. Let me see here. If you're the governor of New York, then you have to deal with funding the state pensions and making sure that those workers are able to go into retirement without having to fear that the fund is going to go bankrupt because you don't have enough revenues coming in from taxes in order to cover them. And one of the solutions to that would be to raise taxes. One of the solutions to that is to lay off workers and cut services. And I usually take the second route. I think that you need less services. You need to trim the size of government, trim the size of how many people work for the state, do less for public, all these public pensions and whatnot. Now, New York's state pension deficit would be, you see here, $37.2 billion. Okay, that's not quite as bad as California, Texas, and Illinois, but it's $4,700 per resident. So they're not that bad, but they're actually going down in efficiency, and that's going to be a real concern going forward. In Illinois, it's worse. And by the way, this doesn't go by party. The governor isn't necessarily the person who's in charge of fucking with the pensions or whatever. There's the state legislatures are very key in that. In Illinois, the Speaker of the House, Michael Madigan, has been really, really, really involved in keeping the state in debt and continuing to kick the can down the road and give in to the teachers union. Let's see here. So it says here, in all but 2 states, Michigan and Alabama, the money set aside as a share of what's needed fell last year to an average ratio of 68%. So that means states have funded just 68 cents for every dollar they owe in future payments. States with the best, so New York's actually in good shape. Wisconsin has 98%, which is good. South Dakota has 97%. New York has 93%. Tennessee has 88%, and North Carolina has 87%. So, they're not in the worst shape in New York State, but remember, now they're going to be giving all that free college. Cynthia Nixon, now that she's jumped into the race, she might start asking for, more and more progressive policies, including single-payer healthcare. Now, if that becomes a major issue, then you start to wonder, how are they going to continue to fund those pensions? And in any case, they're going to have to raise taxes and things like that. You're going to have businesses running away from the state. So I think that those things, in my humble opinion, are more important than the dick fight between de Blasio and Cuomo, or the bitch fight between Cynthia Nixon and Christine Quinn. So that's it for today. Please leave your comments below in the box. If you're from New York State, I'd especially like to hear your opinion. This has been Bold Like a Leopard. It's a quick take. I'm Ramon. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. And, let's keep the conversation going.